Good Shabbos and good morning. It's a very special Shabbat and a special weekend. We've named this Shabbat B'Yachad, Shabbat together. And today, of course, is Sisterhood Shabbat. We've had so much inspiring leadership and participation in our service today by our members of Sisterhood. We're grateful for all that you do for our congregation each and every day and in supporting us in so many ways. For Shabbat B'Yachad, we have brought into town a special guest scholar and speaker. I'm not going to give a long introduction because I think his sermon today is going to tell a little bit of his own story. Correct? A little bit. Rabbi Jeremy Markiz is here largely because he's actually been a part of our community for the last 6 months. Rabbi Markiz has been teaching online our Thursday lunchtime Talmud session. And many of us here have been learning with him from afar as he's based in Washington, D.C. I met Rabbi Markiz about 5 years ago as part of Rabbis Without Borders, a special fellowship cohort from Klal, how to push the boundaries of our work as rabbis. Then Rabbi Markiz was the second rabbi in Pittsburgh at Congregation Beth Shalom, a congregation similar to ours, and we struck up a friendship and maintained that over the last number of years. And we're very grateful. Now Rabbi Markiz has left the pulpit and is doing many things. He is a consultant for congregations for branding and marketing. And he also has started a new website called Exploring Judaism in partnering with the Rabbinical Assembly and the United Synagogue in creating a digital space for conservative voices on the web. And there are many, many more things to share. After our lunch today, sponsored by our sisterhood, Rabbi Markiz will be teaching the next session in his weekend, and then Sunday morning is final. I hope you'll have the opportunity to continue to study with him, not just this weekend, but also every Thursday at lunch online. My pleasure to welcome Rabbi Markiz.
Shabbat Shalom. Everybody can hear me okay? Nice. Let me begin by sharing my gratitude to B'nai Yeshurun, the Sisterhood, Rabbi Hal, for their graciousness and invitation. It's been a gift to spend an hour each week on Thursdays with this community. And it's this community's commitment to Torah in learning and in practice that inspires me. On top of that, oskei b'divrei Torah, the engagement with words of Torah, this community also brings it to a new level. The money you raise for Torah Fund, for example, makes it possible for rabbis like me to afford rabbinical school. On behalf of all rabbinical students, or in my case, former rabbinical students, I thank you. On the final day of 5782, on the 29th of Elul, on the end of the last Jewish year, on Erev Rosh Hashanah, something tremendous happened. My wife and I welcomed a daughter into the world. Thank you. In those first moments, as my wife cradled our child, I remember thinking to myself, listing all of the new responsibilities I had at that moment. I began to think further and further ahead, asking myself about the future I would be leaving to her. So often in life, and for good reason, we stay focused on what is right in front of us. We ignore the far future for what we have to do today. When we have a lot of work to do or feel overwhelmed, it makes sense to ignore the big picture for the sake of the present. The risk is never going back to stop and think about the implications. This is what Joseph experiences at the beginning of Parshat Vayeshev, when he tells his family about his dreams. The Torah tells us that he was uniquely beloved by his father, and his brothers hated him for it. He tells them about his dreams, intimating his power and authority over them. He was always reporting negatively about his brothers' shepherding. It doesn't really seem like Joseph was thinking through his actions at all, or what consequences that might come from them. If you continue to mistreat the people around you, they may not like you that much. What might have happened if Joseph had recognized how he presented himself to his brothers and chose to act towards them with greater kindness and understanding? Had he focused on the long term instead of the short term, he might have made different choices. And part of making good choices is about being able to draw on powerful wisdom, on the stories of those who came before, and from our teachers and parents who guide us. The Me'orei Naim, Rabbi Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl, a Hasidic Rebbe, in the 18th century explains the following as a commentary to one of the first verses in the Parsha that reads, "And Israel loved Joseph." He said, "It is known that the Torah is eternal, in all people and in all times. Despite the fact that it preceded the creation of the world, it is also manifested through the stories of a certain time period of our patriarchs and matriarchs. Nevertheless, it needs to be regarbed in the stories of each time period. This is why it is called Torah, for it reflects the language of Mora Derech, a guide for the way. In that case, we need to understand what guiding is happening as a result of this verse. The Me'orei Naim's understanding of Torah manifests itself into creation, that it's bigger and beyond the limits of our reality, and expresses itself in the Torah, in the stories for each era. It's a guide for us. He reminds us to look closely at the text and see where it leads us. After Joseph bothers his brothers to the point where they want to kill him, when he ultimately appears before them, when they want to kill him, when he ultimately appears before them, they throw him in an empty pit. What the Torah says about the pit is this: V'habor reik ein bo mayim. And the pit was empty, and there was no water. The commentators jump all over this. They ask, if it was empty, why did the Torah tell us there was no water? It seems redundant. In the Talmud on Bava Kama 17a, the rabbis explain that water is often understood as a metaphor for studying Torah. With that in mind, how can we understand this verse better? Reb Chaim of Volozhin, one of the students of the great Vilna Gaon, he explains that a person without Torah is like a pit, empty inside, and that they walk as if in darkness. This specific imagery comes from another piece of Talmud, from Masechet Sota, which describes the power of Torah, and we'll be learning that text this afternoon in its connection to Hanukkah. In a different place in the Talmud in Avodah Zarah, we're taught, Reish Lakish says, with regard to anyone who occupies themselves with Torah in this world, which is comparable to night, the Holy One, blessed be God, extends a thread of kindness over them in the world to come, which is comparable today. And the proof text is, as it is stated, by day the Lord will command God's kindness, and in the night God's song will be with me. God's song is Torah, manifested through creation and a guide for wisdom. As I think about all the things I wish to relay to my daughter as she grows, it's my hope that she will study Torah and understand that it's not just a static text, but something that exists in the present with us. And I think there's no better example for this than Hanukkah. In Masechet Shabbat, a section of Talmud where the teachings of Hanukkah show up, the rabbis ask, what blessing do we recite on Hanukkah? We recite, Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah, who has made us holy through God's commandments and has commanded us to light the Hanukkah lights. The Gemara then asks, where did God command this? Here's the thing. God doesn't command us, even though the blessing says God commands us. For other mitzvot, we can point to a verse in the Torah or Tanakh that commands us to do that thing. Zachor v'shamor Shabbat, remember and keep the Sabbath. Al tevashel gedi b'chalev imo, do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Ahavta l're'echa kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. Each of these mitzvot is drawn from a verse in Torah. So where in Torah or Tanakh does it talk about Hanukkah? It doesn't. Hanukkah doesn't appear in anywhere in the official canon of Tanakh. It does appear in the book of Maccabees, which was likely written in the Second Temple period, describing the events that we celebrate on Hanukkah. and is considered in the category of apocrypha, of apocryphal stories. So how do the rabbis deal with this question? How do they answer it? Where does God command us to light the Hanukkah candles? The Talmud answers. Rav Avia said, it comes from this verse. You shall act in accordance with the Torah that is given you. Yes, the Torah uses the word Torah. And the ruling handed down to you, you must not turn aside from the word that they tell you, to the left nor to the right, from Deuteronomy. So what is Rav Avia saying? Rashi tells us that the commandment is not in the Torah, but in the rabbi's words. This is a tremendous and powerful statement. At this moment, Rav Avia reveals the awesome power that we humans have in relationship to Torah. Torah didn't just exist when it was written down, but is in relationship with us, our ancestors, and our descendants in every generation. While on Sunday, we will learn the Shulchan Aruch, there's another compendium of law known as the Aruch HaShulchan by Rabbi Yechiel Epstein for the 19th century. And he writes the following about disagreements in Jewish text. All of the arguments of the rabbis, of the Mishnah and the Talmud, and the Gaonim and the halachic decisors, for one who understands them correctly, these are all the words of the living God. And they all have a place in Jewish law. And on the contrary, this is the glory of our holy and pure Torah. The entire Torah is called a song. And the beauty of a song is when the voices are all different, which is the essence of pleasantness. And the one who wanders the sea of Talmud will see the pleasantness in the differences between the voices. The Aruch HaShulchan reminds us that Torah is something we receive, it's something handed down to us, it's something we share and we pass on from each of us to one another. And that the beauty, the essential quality of Torah is that each of us have a place in it. Each and every one of our voices is an instrument in the orchestra that is Torah. The rabbis ask how God spends God's time during the day. The Talmud tells us that God spends the last hours of every day teaching Torah to his children. This is the lesson I want my daughter to understand. This is the relationship I wish for her. I want her to understand that her experience of Torah is unique and important, that her voice matters, that the future of Judaism in the period after ours is in her hands to engage with, to guide, and to inspire. Shabbat Shalom.